In the traditional and corporate workplace environment, long before your favorite beer was a sensitive topic, there were typically four things you never discussed: race, religion, sex, and politics. Yes, I do find that a little bit interesting that I have to bleep those out. But in the welding workplace environment, there are actually five sensitive topics that you never discuss, and that fifth sensitive topic is the color of your tungsten.
It's Weld Coach, your personal welding instructor, anywhere.
If you're new here, welcome to Weld Coach. My name is Justin. I'm the creator of the Fabrication Series YouTube channel, and I teach classes one-on-one over at weldcoach.com. You should go over there and book a class. Or at least after this episode, right? Because we should definitely cover some stuff when it comes to tungsten. Now, before we get carried away arguing down in the comments about which color works best, we should probably understand exactly what tungsten is and, well, why we use it. Now, tungsten is a naturally occurring metal element found in the Earth's crust. According to the periodic table of elements, it has the highest melting temperature of any other metal on the face of the Earth, has excellent thermal conductivity, and is resistant to just about everything corrosive, except for salty old welders on the internet that refuse to get with the times. Who wrote that? Oh. Tungsten is so awesome that we've been using it for almost 100 years exclusively as the electrode in TIG welding. But over the course of those almost 100 years, some things have changed with the different varieties and such with tungsten. Some of them have different elements blended in to create an alloy of tungsten, which maybe makes it serve a better purpose or unique to an application. And some of them have even been claimed to work better on newer machines as technology continues to evolve. But if you've ever tried to research the topic of which tungsten color is best and works for which metal and which one is the newest and in what order they came in, you've likely been greeted by the classic color chart that's on every welding supplies website, followed by a sales listing. And if you've ever asked something like, Facebook groups or forums or whatever the case is, you'll find 1,000 different answers and a bunch of, different explanations of it, which likely prompted you to just buy a color and use it, only to find out later that somebody told you that it's the wrong color. Well, the good news here is that it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever which color tungsten you want to use. There is no such thing as a tungsten that will make or break a weld just because you used it. Anybody who says differently is either super stubborn in their ways or they haven't learned what you're about to learn right now. Different tungsten varieties and blends were all created to solve a problem that the early constant current machines, aka old transformer units, all had. And that was that they were all basically pretty much the exact same machine regardless of the brand. Old school transformer machines were insanely primitive and horribly inefficient, and as such, different oxides were blended into the tungsten to make the machine perform better on a specific application. In the beginning, we only had one kind of tungsten, and that was pure tungsten, now color-coded green. Pure tungsten would weld everything, but the problem was that it would erode quickly, it would never really keep its point very, very sharp, and of course if you started to push it well above and beyond what it was rated for, it would tend to want to split or kind of break apart. That would mean you'd have to constantly change out your consumables or have a whole arsenal of consumables matched to the correct tungsten size. Now if you had to constantly switch between consumables for different jobs, that would mean it would take longer and cost more money. There is a timeline somewhere in there of when all of these different oxides were introduced, but no one really knows it all that much. But zirconium oxide provided better arc starts on AC, and it could handle higher amperage than green pure tungsten. It's also not radioactive. Cerium oxide was good for making an all-purpose tungsten, which was also remarkably stable and crisp at low amperage. It's also not radioactive. Lanthanum oxide became super popular as lower percentages of it were remarkably stable on DC, and higher percentages of the mix became the first all-purpose super tungsten that wasn't radioactive. Thorium oxide was responsible for making the tungsten virtually indestructible, as you could throw just about anything you wanted onto this stuff, from thin to thick to pushing it well above and beyond its amperage. But as is with all things radioactive, they're good for everything except for you. Now, the red stuff was my favorite tungsten for everything that I welded back in the day. I mean, red was it. I'd grab a pack of it, call it a day. You could not tell me otherwise that any other color would be better than red. Like, red was it. But sometime in 2011, the radioactive red scare hit and a lot of packages were pulled off the shelves to the point where you just simply couldn't buy it anymore. And a lot of people, including myself, were forced to change colors. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really keen on the idea of changing my tungsten colors. I was right where it was at. But I also wasn't interested in glowing green. And of course, I'm not going to give up my career in welding. So a lot of people were forced to change and try different colors. Now, the aforementioned colors are what we would consider to be the classics of the tungsten color chart. I mean, there were other blends and oxides that were mixed in to create another color, but we simply just don't use them anymore. They're few and far between. However, any one of those colors that I've mentioned up to this point can be used on an inverter machine, at least once. Pure green tungsten has an arc stability problem on inverter machines. In my experience, it's basically that the arc will start once, or at least the first time, but if you try to fire it a second time, the answer is no, it will not do it. Or it will be so friggin' erratic that it can't focus and it can't light up or whatever the case is. So it's widely accepted that we do not use green pure tungsten on inverter machines. And the same thing has also been said about white tungsten, but the results are often mixed. And in all honesty, I don't use white tungsten. I never really have, so I can't really offer my opinion on that matter. So in short, the classic tungsten colors can be used to weld just about anything on most machines. But if you're still rocking an old school transformer unit, you'll likely find best results if you just stick to the chart. But this is where it gets interesting, the rare earth blends. Purple tungsten hit the scene somewhere around 2011, right after that radioactive red scare. It claimed that it could solve all of the other tungsten's problems and shortfalls by combining several oxides together to create one super tungsten that wasn't radioactive, basically. Soon after, a few other manufacturers popped up with their own colors and derivatives of this that basically did the exact same thing, but with the manufacturer's own kick to it. Rare earth blends feature several oxides blended together to create one super tungsten instead of just one. It's largely up to the manufacturer to define or decide which percentages of each one they want to use, but generally speaking, they all use different blends of lanthanum, yttrium, zirconium, and even cerium. Some of them even use all four. Rare earth blends are widely accepted as the tungstens that weld every single metal on every single machine that ever existed. And for the most part, that's completely true. But then ultimately the question then becomes is, which color should you use? Well, as is with many things in TIG welding, there's never really an exact answer for it because it's largely based on preference, unless a written procedure says otherwise. Basically meaning you can throw any color you want into your torch, load it up, make the weld, and if it did the job you wanted it to do, then you're good. There's technically no right or wrong. But if you want my opinion on this one, I'll give it to you. And with full-on disclosure, transparency here, this is not a paid product endorsement. But at the time of this video, this is the color that I use. CK Worldwide Laser Tungsten, color code Chartreuse, not to be confused with actual green. After the radioactive scare in 2011, I was forced to change colors of tungsten like many other people were. And for a while, I went right back to blue because that was, what I used for a little bit, and I kind of liked it, except for, well, it wasn't really nearly as good as red, my beloved red. 2% lanthanated or blue tends to kind of slowly dull over the course of time. It didn't really hold its point forever and ever like my beloved red would do. And of course, I couldn't really push it as high into the amperage range as I wanted to. It would just wouldn't withstand it. It would kind of, dull itself out or whatever the case is. Like, it was good for all around, but not really what my red could do. And of course I tried purple for a while, and it's good, but it tends to split in the higher amperage range when you really start to push it. And then same thing happened with pink, and I tried a few other colors like Q4 and everything else like that. Even went back to like 2% serrated for a while. That used to be colored orange, but now it's colored gray. For some reason they switched it, right? So I've been kind of all over the board with all of my tungsten and my choices. Now eventually they did figure out that red, or thoriated, 2% thoriated, was not radioactive, or as radioactive as it should be to be scary, if you will. But at that time, the damage had already been done. You tell me radiation, and I think Chernobyl. About 3 years or so ago, laser came across my workbench, and like all the other ones, I gave it a try. But then I soon discovered that this stuff is about the closest thing I ever have to my beloved red. It is virtually indestructible, and my 3/32 or 2.4 millimeter size can weld everything from razor blades to 1/4-inch aluminum without really having to change it out. You can push it, and it's remarkably stable on every other end. And until something better comes along, this is the color that I'm going to use. And if I find something else that I like, well, I'm going to give it a try, and if it's good, that's what I'm going to run with. And that's what I encourage everybody to do. Try a bunch of different types of tungsten. If you like it, then run it. If you don't like it, don't use it. Try something else. But it's a good idea to not get stuck in your ways and say, well, this is the only thing, because it's technically not true. One more thing worth mentioning here is the tungsten itself, or the different brands and the price tags that you often see. In the beginning, you're going to go through a lot of tungsten. It's just the natural progression of learning how to TIG weld. You're going to screw it up and you're going to use a whole lot of it. It is a consumable at the end of the day. So most people in the beginning are like, you know what, I'll just buy the cheapest stuff as possible so that way I'm not, going to be out so much money while I'm learning. The biggest problem with that is cheap products produce cheap results. You're never really guaranteed to get what you actually think you're supposed to get or what is claimed to be on the box. So let's just say it's a 2% lanthanated tungsten, which is extremely popular. You can't guarantee that on that $10 pack, it's going to actually be 2% lanthanated to that quality standard in which it's supposed to be. Basically meaning if you bought the cheap stuff, you're probably going to see a lot of different anomalies in your welds and art characteristics that are not conducive to good products. You're going to find better results with better products. So in other words, stick with actual name brands. Stay away from all the cheapo stuff that you see on there because they pretty much sell tungsten shaped objects that sort of almost just barely work. And that's really not what you want. Well, I think that just about wraps it up as far as tungsten is concerned. Pretty sure I covered all of it. That is quite a bit to take in. But hey, at least you know what your coaches know, so that way when you get onto a class, you're not wasting a bunch of time trying to figure out, what do I use for tungsten and asking all these questions or whatever. You got all the answers right here, right? It's a great thing. And if you're new here, maybe you should consider subscribing because we could use it. A little bump in the algorithm kind of thing, And if you found this helpful, maybe share it with your friends. And go book a class on Weld Coach. Because you get an instructor, like right then and there in front of you. Running out of stuff to say about tungsten. Thanks for watching.